the 30th.
God. Oh,
No, because it said off. And I was thinking that, okay, when it says off, which means that if I press this, it will go off. But I didn't know that it actually meant that it was off.
you are truly a man of your generation. Okay. All right, but now we know. So your USB mic does work. Everything does work.
It's just I didn't
Okay,
press the button.
perfect.
That's like the first question that any customer service will ask you. Did you press the
Yes,
on button or did you connect the
I just,
power cord? How are you?
good. How are you?
Hectic.
Well, that's your usual default, right? Life is always hectic for you. So
These 2 weeks are insanely hectic. Not only because of the user default, but I mean, just look at the amount of people who have descended to Singapore. just crazy.
yeah, I think that's one of the topics, and of course that's part of your main job, right? So let's begin.
Yeah.
So hello, barbarians, and welcome into episode 16 of the LLB podcast with us, myself, Alex, your host of EOA, and with us, Jianggan Lee, the information superconnector. And as you can see, we're missing two of our fellow compatriots, Andrew G and Dave Chang. They are lost in the mountains in Bulgaria, if I'm not mistaken. So Dave is doing,
together.
Dave is using his usual, they're together.
Together in the
So they're
mountains.
using their usual end of year tour.
Oh my God.
And Dave is spending time in Europe before going back to the US. Andrew is doing what he's always been doing, lost around the world, building startups in different countries, who knows what, but they decided to meet up, I think. It actually managed to work out. So we'll just decided to just catch up with Jianggan because I think we have some pending topics. A lot of things are happening, like we were just mentioning. I think for the last episode, we wanted to discuss what the geopolitics of what's happening, and that somehow relates to all the people coming to Singapore now, right? And I think very specifically what you're noticing, a lot of big companies from China with very important positions permanently moving to Singapore, correct? Or are you talking about there's more countries and more people coming to Singapore?
Is that a question?
That is a question, yes.
I think, I mean, I'm not sure if you have checked the hotel prices in Singapore this week and the next week. And obviously there's F1, which is coming.
What's F1? It's mostly F1.
Yeah, but people only staying for 4 days for F1. So I mean,
That's true.
this week there's conferences. I mean, of course, there's Tech in Asia. There's Steel Street Asia happening this 2 weeks. But more importantly, I think this week there's this super return, which typically happened in Hong Kong before the pandemic. But since Hong Kong is still sort of requiring quarantine, and they decided to do it in Singapore. So basically, it's an event where VCs, PEs, the general partners are meeting their LPs, the guys who actually give the money. So that's a big conference happening in town. And next week there's the Token 2049, allegedly the largest crypto conference of the year.
World,
yeah.
right?
So just so many people there. I mean, so since we're kind of well known in the ecosystem in China, and a lot of people when they come here, they reach out to us saying that, hey, can we meet up? And obviously many of them have very interesting profiles, very interesting backgrounds, and had been doing very interesting things in China. So it's I mean, for me, it has been like a few weeks of intensive discussions about a lot of topics, and a lot of learnings as well. But it has been really intensive. Meetings, chit chat.
What are those main learnings then? Like, we're talking about people who are going to be permanently settled here, or what is the outlook, or are they just putting out feelers?
Actually, that's a question that everybody's asking, right? I mean, everybody's trying to decide for themselves, and everybody's trying to figure out, I mean, what would be the trend for everybody else. I mean, Alex, you have been in the ecosystem for many years. You remember that in 2017 to 2018, there were a bunch of Chinese VCs and Chinese tech companies coming to the region saying that, hey, we are armed with our best experience, our advanced technology, etc., etc. We wanted to expand our presence into Southeast Asia. I think towards the second half of 2019, so people pretty much labeled those guys as tourists, right? They came, they talked to lots of people. Correct. They realized saying that, hey, this market is so different from China, and most of them went back to China. So everybody's asking that, okay, this time around, is it the same or is it different? Is it a big party that's going to be over? next month, or something's going to be more permanent? I think nobody has a definite answer, because I mean, just like a market, right? You have like a large number of participants who are each making their individual decisions based on their own sentiment, based on their own preference, based on their capabilities and capacity, but also based on what they perceive others might do.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's also very different macro environment than what we talked about. Like when we were making predictions, I think it is, to me, it seems and it feels that it's very significantly different this time around, because from what we were talking about at the beginning of the year with our
Mm,
predictions of the macro environment, just the whole entire just sentiment of the the economy and this whole scene from VC to building startups was very different than what we've gone through
mm,
now, right? Especially at the end of the year. And I'm barely plugged in, but I could just tell. And it seems that it's causing a big shift
mm,
across the region of how people are thinking about things and where to go. And is this I guess does tie back to the politics too,
mm,
right? You know, I don't know the exact situation of what's happening in China now. Maybe you could help fill that in, but it does seem that there is still some type of hold that China has where people are looking outwards more. And I think it's just a matter of time if people can feel settled, and then kind of like, how the first wave that we've been here for so long, for more than a decade doing this. I think this is just going to be the next wave of the generation where it's more meaningful. Because if, say, can the Chinese people who are here now exploring, I guess they could go back, but where else could they go, right? But then they're stuck back in square one back in China
mm,
now, right? And there's a reason why they're looking to leave.
mm.
I mean, I guess there's other parts of the world too, but I think, as a first stop for Singapore, that's a really great place to be in terms of sitting between two worlds of East and West, right? So I don't know, what is your take on this?
I think first, yeah, you're right that this time feels a bit different, because 2017 to 2019, you have large organizations, you have VCs, you have, I mean, companies, but rarely you see founders, you see managing partners. I mean, coming to this region, you mainly see like, okay, so in the case of VC, an associate, a vice president, or an MD coming here, scanning around, and maybe making like a 2 or 3 investments, but most of them would just go back empty-handed. But this time, for every single organization I've been meeting, it's the decision maker, it's the managing partner, it's the CEO, it's the founder. So that's the reason why things are hectic, right? I mean, you don't want to miss the opportunity to so
Yeah.
intensely, I mean, talk to many founders and many managing partners to just learn and exchange about what's happening in China. And you probably hear a lot in the press about this zero COVID policy, and
Yeah.
and that rendered lots of things actually quite hard to do. So basically, if you're a VC and say based in Shanghai, and you are focused on investing in, say, cross-border e-commerce companies, which are largely in Hangzhou and Shenzhen. And I mean, in the past, if you look at the schedule of these guys, I mean, they would fly like, I don't know, 4 or 5 times a week, I mean, domestic flights. But now, I mean, everybody has this fear, right? I mean, if I fly to a city and the city goes on a lockdown, then I'm stuck. So
Yeah.
as a
Yeah.
result, I might as well not move. But and the same goes to the funders and companies, right? I mean, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know if I mean, for the manufacturing companies, if I manufacture, I mean, am I able to send goods out? Is the logistics going to be smooth? I mean, for consumers, I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know whether I'll be locked down for a week, 2 weeks. So I'm not willing to spend. I might as well hold the cash. So you see a cycle. I mean, not really a cycle, but you see this macro sentiment where people are not expanding their production capacity. People are not spending as they would otherwise do. People are not taking credit as they would otherwise do. So the economy is taking a big impact, and of course that dents people's confidence. I mean, of course, the question is that what will happen after the party congress in October? So, and I think generally people are expecting some positive news. And I think for the people,
Has
yeah,
to be.
for the people who are here, so what type of positive news would prompt them to go back, and how many of them will go back, and how many will say that, okay, I'm going to take the
I
risk.
see.
I'm going to explore Southeast Asia. I'm going to explore global markets.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, it it would seem prudent regardless, though. I mean, given that what we've seen in the past year for people start hedging, it doesn't have to be Southeast Asia, but just like you said, globally. And I do think you are right, though. Like, given the political scene, like of what's been happening, China does have to incentivize their best to, to be retain talent and to get back on track for the, the 5-year plan, the 10-year plan, whatever it is, the world domination plan,
The
right? So
5.5%
it,
economic growth target for this year. So
exactly,
yeah.
exactly, right. And that has to include entrepreneurs and the guys who are, investing in this, right? Investment in the backbone and infrastructure and everything else. So I do think a portion of what you said is going to be true, where some will definitely be incentivized, but they probably also not, they're very smart. They probably will start diversifying and probably more in a meaningful way, especially now if the decision makers are here seeing and feeling and meeting the talent. I mean, the amount of cycles that we've gone through of what we've been seeing is just, it changes so fast, across every year it changes. Like, it's like you're calling a 2017 to 2019 a period, but that's like, even before that, it was just like the 5 years before that, it was even insanely different from when we first started building companies in a region, right? So I think that, with more, and I think this is great for the region if they could permanently stay, because, we do just need better investors. We need smarter money. We need better efficient, structures. We need more talent. We need more diverse views, right? And I think it only gets better with that. Of course, it also lends to the benefit of China if they can finally get a meaningful foothold outside China to learn on a permanent basis, right? Because we've known this from more than 10 years ago, is that Chinese companies, it's wave after wave, from Tencent to all the way till now to the 2016, 17s, like you said, that there hasn't been anything that meaningful, I guess you could say. I mean, there are big companies, there are big presences, but like, I don't know. I don't get the feeling that China is like the number one winner in Southeast Asia, right? Yeah, I feel like every country is developing their own thing. It's very unique ecosystems, and it's still very wide open, right? And that's my takeaway, I guess. I don't know if you
I
agree
think
or not.
I think just look at fintech in Southeast Asia. I think back in 2016, 2017, 2016, Alibaba bought Lazada.
Yeah,
And I think that was also the year they started making all this joint venture. I mean, Ant had started making all this joint venture e-wallets in each country. So at that time, I
yeah,
mean, you see the sense is that everybody was scared about, I mean, Ant taking over everything, and everybody was trying to
yeah.
either work with
True.
Ant or create alternatives. And but everybody was like alert. I mean, even you see that, I mean, for instance, the banks in Thailand, they started innovating back then, saying that okay, if we don't,
Oh
yeah,
yeah,
if you don't,
right.
and it's going to be the orange,
SEB and
yeah,
everyone.
SBK Bank, everyone.
Yeah,
But fast forward
yeah,
for I mean a few years now. I mean, if you ask the fintech players, the banks, the regulators, in each country in Southeast Asia, are they still fearful about this ant takeover? No, and of course, part
no,
of
they're
that
not.
is Ant's own problems in China, for a number of reasons. But also part of that is people start to figure out that that the business model that in China, where you build two dominant duopoly of wallets, that has a bunch of other services, transactions, use cases on top of that,
Yeah,
and covering every single aspect of consumers' life. It's not happening in
yeah,
this region. In each of the countries, it's not happening.
yeah. Like I think this anecdote makes me realize why the most successful tech companies in the world don't always necessarily can branch out horizontally to other product services and markets. It's like, even like, with Meta pulling out of e-commerce, we don't see like social commerce dominating on these other big tech company platforms except from China themselves, right? It's just, I think it's, the world is too big and it's too different in certain regions for, just because you have a monopoly in one place where it's just going to be ubiquitous to other. And like you said, the fintech example just points to that. And I'm actually genuinely surprised too of how fintech has unfolded in the region. Like, I will complain about all the problems within each country, but if you take a step back and look, like these days, I literally don't need to use cash in Malaysia if I want to. And it just, and you think that just a few years ago, it was so fragmented and people weren't sure what was going to happen. And, we make fun of, like, the Alibaba touch and go deal for all we want, but everywhere I go now, like I could literally on every vendor just could probably just use touch and go as the main way to pay. Of course they have all the other payments, grab, whatever. But I mean, like, Apple Pay is now ubiquitous too. Like there's no like I it's just very weird to think like I would always carry a wad of cash with me for the past 10 years, but now I don't need to. Right. And it's not how we thought, like say 5 years ago, if we were predicting, it's not how we thought of how
Yeah.
the fintech ecosystem would have
Yeah.
unfolded. Right.
I'm saying for me, right, in Singapore, I mean, the only thing I bring is this, right? I sometimes I don't even bring my phone
Yeah.
because the
Correct.
card is tokenized through Apple Pay, and I would say that at least in Singapore, I mean, the NFC terminals are deployed to sufficient density and prevalence
Yeah.
that I see, so I don't need to function without. I mean, I don't need to bring cash, wallet, even a phone sometimes because now you don't need to check in. Um, but but in Malaysia, do you think that you use Touch and Go? I mean, how did you start to use Touch and Go wallet? Is that because of the RFID? Because the government said that okay, you start using this to top up or to pay for your toll because in Malaysia everyone drives, right?
Yeah. Well, I think, and I think that was maybe the smart insight that Alibaba was banking on was that in terms of largest user base, everyone was using the old smart
Mm,
tag system, which is the device where you put the touch and go card in to use for
mm,
toll, right? But the app rolled out soon after that, and then only RFID rolled after that. So everyone had the app. Back then, that was during the kind of e-wallet war phase when everyone had an e-wallet. From Razor Pay to every bank rolled
we
out
counted
one. Some other
we counted
names.
at some point in time. I think 2017 or 2018. We counted about 800 wallets in Southeast Asia.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, it was just because at the time everyone downloaded I think you could see in everyone's app in Malaysia probably has a few
Mm,
wallets from that's when they were doing user acquisition and they were doing the benefits. But in terms of dominance, Grab
mm,
stays, Touch and Go stays because these are actual use case needs. You're not going to get rid of either your ride share or your food as much as we like to make fun of them, for not doing so well on stock price and whatnot. But they do solve a real problem, so that is not going to go away as a wallet. They keep building on top of that. And then, of course, touch and go, you always have to have toll. That's like an absolute monopoly, right? And it's just a matter of just improving the experience over time, which they have. And then they worked on the supply side of making sure it was ubiquitously everywhere in every vendor stall around Malaysia, right? And it just started because of just that one period in time when everyone was doing wallets. And of course, it wasn't clear who's going to be a winner at the time. I think no one probably would have thought that these would, the guys who are around now are the main
mm.
ones, right? So, but that's how it is.
Actually, talking about Touch and Go, I'm not sure if you followed the news about Dana, which raised money from cinemas and Lazada. I think Lazada became the largest single shareholder of Dana, which is the wallet that Ant Group built with
Oh,
MTech
okay.
in Indonesia. So interestingly, I mean, I have a few friends who are running different services with the wallets platform, and everybody has been telling me that during the pandemic, the usage of OVO, which is owned by Grab, and the GoPay, which is
Yeah.
owned by GoTo or Gojek, um, I have largely grown a little bit, but Dana's growth has been phenomenal. So we did a bit of dig.
Do they say why?
Yeah, they did. So two things. So first, a lot of people use that for transfers. So basically, when you are in the sort of the neighborhoods, in the localities, sometimes in rural areas, that people don't really have access to ATM to do the transfer easily, and a lot of people would just use the stores and just transfer money over Dana. So they built that use case to be really strong because they don't charge. I mean, in the past, we do the transfer via ATM or via other sort of channels. There's a fee, and I think they subsidize that fee to get the user numbers up. And now with Lazada coming in, I think they're trying to build Dana into Lazada users because in Indonesia, Lazada is about, I think, in terms of GMV, probably less. I mean, the difference is less big, but in terms of number of parcels, Lazada is probably one third of Shopee's size, and of course, I
Yeah.
started to know that they're not happy about their position, being the second, which is far behind I mean, the first, and now it's TikTok coming. So I'm sure they'll do something about it, and especially Lazada now. They built their own sort of team to look after payment and financial services. The guy leading that used to lead Ant in Southeast Asia, so he knows Ant inside out, and when he's driving that, he knows exactly what he should ask Ant to do, and he knows exactly what he should
Yeah.
take in his own hands because leaving that to Ant will never make things happen.
Well, yeah. So this also reminds me of
Mm,
like, I don't know about your
mm,
network, but when I talk to people in my network, anecdotally, from my understanding, is that Shopee Pay is not doing as well as they want it to be, and in fact, they probably scaled back significantly amounts, which I guess this ties into our other topic of the Shopee layoff,
mm,
and it also goes to show that you have a big cash generating machine or you've raised a lot of money doesn't mean you necessarily win in this market. It points to talking what you're talking about. You got to look at these features, these pain points,
mm,
and once you understand them, you got to productize it very well and execute it on very well.
mm.
And, just because you're a big guy, with big guns doesn't mean you're actually going to survive in the long run, right? Does that like line up to what you're hearing about Shopee with their layoffs and with Pay not doing well? And, how does that fit into the bigger
I think
picture?
I think the pay of platform has been a difficult point. I think for Shopee Pay and as well as for Grab Pay. So I think I understand that GrabPay is not as
Yeah.
aggressively as they would have in the past to deploy, I mean, GrabPay offline merchants and stuff. So they are now more focused on building the financial services on the platform. And of course, part of that is the profitability agenda. Part of that is also looking at, I mean, the previous Chinese thesis, right? I mean, you try to cover everything. I would say that that what Touch and Go has been able to do in Malaysia, because everyone drives, everyone has to use that. It's really really a special use case.
Yeah.
Um, um, and also if you think about it's, I've always been thinking about is that I mean during the pandemic, every government has a QR checking system that trained everyone to use QR.
Yeah.
And of course, maybe it's not the right thing for government to do, but just imagine if they attach the payment system behind their QR checking app. That could have been very interesting.
Assuming they could really even get it done. I mean, I don't know about a country by basis, but for the countries that I
Yeah.
know about, it was your typical run of the mill problems, contractors and
Mm,
all these kind of problems where, money wasn't used efficiently, wasted too much money
mm.
to build it. Probably could get done. And I think that's the general direction though. I do notice like over time governments do deploy technology better.
Mm,
It's just very slow for us to see because we live in the countries at the moment, right?
mm,
But I mean, I wouldn't put it too far off where that does happen, change in the future where, you're mostly paying for actually, like Malaysia has moved a lot of stuff online.
mm.
I mean, I'm pretty sure at this point Singapore is probably all online in terms of government paperwork and payments, right? So I don't see why it wouldn't be the case in the next 10 years where it's just going to move in that direction, right? It's not at the speed as, for, how we do it in the private sector. So
But I think you point out something quite interesting. So a lot of times, and you look at things in theory that that makes sense. But when you try to deploy that in practice, there's lots of friction. And I think the same
yeah,
for government apps, because you have contractors. I mean, even though there's no like under the table stuff going around, there's still like all this like
yeah,
I mean, you have used outsourced team before, right? You know how it feels, right? I mean, I
of
have my
course.
expectation, and they
Yeah,
understand it poorly, and the product that comes back is not up to my expectation. Then it's like back and forth, back and forth. Then lots of
correct.
time wasted. But generally, when you apply that to startups, which have their own tech team, when things get into the real world, you have a lot of friction, right? I mean, these days you probably hear from the news that lots of the grocery delivery startups in Southeast Asia, which are not doing well. I mean, in theory, uh, where every single of them went to investors to raise money, they have done the projections, they have done the calculations, everything would
Yeah,
make sense. But in reality, in the market, reliability of the supply chain, the rent, the efficiency of the riders you can get, etc., etc. I mean, all sorts of frictions that you need to deal
correct.
with.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. So before maybe we dive deeper into this, why don't we address the other main topic then, the Shopee layoffs? What like I think 2 weeks ago when I was in
Mm,
Singapore, I think that was like the first round of layoffs, right? And apparently they're having another round.
mm.
So what do you think is going on internally, and what do you think are the consequences, or why is this even happening to begin with?
Mm. I do think that that the last 2 years, Shopee was growing very fast, and I think they almost deliberately deprioritized efficiency. So there were lots of efficiencies. I mean, if you want to fix a problem, and you just hire people. I mean, you could argue that okay, this is efficient, but when capital was cheap, maybe that was the right thing to do, right? Because you focus on resources on the most important metric at that time, which was growth. But of course, as we stand now, end of Q3 2022, with the war out there, with the Fed raising the interest rate for the third time of 75, was it third time, like at 75 basis points?
I
Yeah.
think so,
So
if I'm
so
not
so so
mistaken.
ba- so so the capital sentiment is really bad, and etc. etc. So of course, I mean, you need to adjust, and I just think that that they anticipated that things might go bad, but they didn't anticipate that things went bad for to worse in a very very quick succession. Um, we did it.
Can you qualify that?
Sorry,
What was bad to worse?
I mean the market sentiment. So
Okay, just sentiment in
just sentiment
general
in
then.
general.
Because so what are you saying? Like the thesis was that they were banking on raising more money to keep growing the machine because the sentiment was good?
I think first they raised lots of money, and at a fairly expensive prices. I mean, about a year ago, September last year,
Yeah.
and November last year is when things started to decline, and of course, I mean, the war started in February, and the inflation went sort of out of, I mean, I wouldn't say out of control, but it went persistently high for a much longer
Yeah.
time than people had anticipated. And now people are talking about a potential recession for, I don't know, 12 months, 18 months. Some people are, I mean, some of the really like seasoned Chinese investors I've been talking to in Singapore last few days, they are saying that maybe this is the start of the big cycle, because if you look at the Great Depression, if you look at the oil crisis, and it's about like 40-50 years, and some major correction might happen. So of course their thesis might be wrong, and because you don't have enough sample size in history to predict what's going to happen, but if the collective sentiment is bad, it could really go to something which nobody has prepared for. You're on mute.
Sorry. So if I'm reading in between the lines, what you're saying is that Shopee was banking on a better market environment to keep growing. They want to and effectively keep growing the machine,
Of course.
even if it was inefficient or not, and keep using money, keep raising money probably. But the reality is that the market was much worse. So
Mm.
I don't know. Do you think that was a sound strategy then? Like, because it feels that like regardless of conditions, you should be you should be at day one. You should be prepared to some degree, I guess. You should be able to turn the
I
ship
think,
if necessary, which I guess they are doing.
yeah.
Um, was this just a bad bet, you think? And
I,
that do you think they have the ability to correct and get back on path then? Because that
I
changes
think,
a lot of things then, right?
yeah, I think they definitely have the capability to correct. I mean, if you look at the actions they have done in the past few weeks in succession, and cutting cost, and the CEO of the group saying that, okay, I'm not going to travel. Sorry, was he saying about traveling on economy, even though he had a private plane?
Yeah.
But anyway, um, so if you look at a series of actions, and of course, I mean, from business point of view, these are all right actions, and they do have the cash. And I think we did some count, and they do have the cash to last them for about 3.5 years. But obviously, they have I think how much, $600? Sorry, $600 million worth of convertible notes, which are going to mature in 2015 at a strike price of 90. So which means that before that, I need to push the price above 90 share price. Otherwise
Yeah.
they will face a redemption. So, but but now if you think about it, it's actually quite scary, because if they didn't raise that 6 billion in September last year, they would have gone.
Yeah. And to me, it sounds like they would, yeah. So effectively, I think they understand that. That's very existential, right? And I think the big push internally must be to push all the big categories towards profitability. And I think like in terms of food, they have to be profitable. In terms of, I don't know about pay, if that's even a thing anymore. E-commerce
Mm.
probably has to push profitability because, especially with Garena's gaming sector, like that segment of the business is not going to be supporting that growth materially. I think that's
Mm.
probably going to be the main focus. So, but I don't know. I don't follow the reports that well, that closely, but I don't know if they have enough scale to justify the valuations. And if not, it means share price will be continue to be depressed relative to, even if they can get to profitable, right? Because as we profitable at the size where, that makes a lot of sense. So I don't know. I think there's still a big question mark in the market, right?
It is. It is. But if you look at the companies in the market, I mean, C Group as a whole has enough cash to last them for 3.5 years at the current burn,
Yeah.
at the Q2 level of burn. Grab has enough cash to last them for 4 years at the Q2 level of burn, and then both company are reducing their burn and increasing profitability. So I guess the companies will survive, and at what valuation,
Correct.
and how the market changed, we don't know. I mean, I was in Jakarta 2 weeks ago for a few days, and I don't know, lucky enough to witness the protest because of the fuel price hike. So the government
Mm.
raised the fuel price by 30%. So we're speaking with some e-commerce logistic companies, and they said it's basically every month they're spending millions of dollars more on fuel. And of course,
Oof.
I think in many Southeast Asian markets, logistics is actually a huge percentage of the overall economy. And when that
Yeah.
cascades down to people's consumption power, to the cost of fulfillment, I think the headwinds for e-commerce is actually pretty strong in many markets.
Let me, before we move to the final topic, what is your take on Indonesia and how it's developing? Has there been any big changes, or do you think it's still in line with the same sentiment that we've been seeing in the past few years, where Indonesia is the big gorilla in the market, everyone still wants to invest in there, or has that changed to some degree? Have people's perception changed around it, how people are building or investing in Indonesia?
Um, First, it's really, really. I mean, I personally felt really good to be back to Jakarta because so of course we did a number of businesses in Indonesia, and we sold one beginning in
Yeah.
2020. Had not gone back to Indonesia for more than 2 years. Of course, we had colleagues who have been traveling back and forth, but the feeling in Jakarta is that you're in a big city, right? I mean, energy is positive, and you feel that you could do things. I guess that's the sentiment of many founders and would-be founders and the company
Yeah.
executives. I think investors, if you look at the amount of funding that has been raised by VCs to invest in Southeast Asia, the amount's actually pretty big, right? I mean, you have
Yeah.
300 million, 400 million, 500 million. In Sakura's case, dedicated Southeast Asian fund for 800 million. So there's lots of money, which they either need to invest or return to the LPs. And my sense that
Opus.
they will not return. They will find a way to invest. So so basically, I mean, a bunch of my friends who are founders or would be founders have been approached by VCs. I mean, they've been having chats about, hey, do you want to build something? So there's lots of discussions going on. I think
That
overall, I
seems to be
mean,
the case in the region, though, right?
yeah,
That where you're approached to build something, whereas the other way, in other big markets is that there's enough founders who have to ask for the money. But I do get the feeling though that they're like this big pool of money needs to convince or find founders to actually build. Is that correct?
I would say that in the market you have more liquidity compared to, I mean, in the VC sort of entrepreneur space, you have more liquidity compared to good founders, and that has been the case since I think 2016,
Yeah.
2017.
Even before
Um,
that. Yeah.
yeah, but now there's more money. Arguably, there could be more founders. I mean, you have more people who have gone through C, more people who have gone through Grab, more people. I mean, still
Yeah.
the people
Correct.
from our Rocket days, they're still loitering around. The question is that you need to find a match, right? You need to find a match of the right founder, the right market,
Yeah.
and the right potential, the right team, and the right solution. So that might not be always
Yeah.
that straightforward.
And my gut take is that there's a big mismatch in those types of people coming out of these these big companies who's either been through the
Mm,
Rocket Mill, the Grab, or
mm,
Shopees and whatnot. Because some of the smartest guys I know who would probably make the best founders, they're either taking their time in building what they want to build and not rushing till they find a way to do user acquisition at a reasonable rate or at a
mm,
way that's more viral. And those
mm.
guys are preferring cash over equity in many of the jobs that they're taking. some of the smartest guys I know who should be great founders, right? Uh, they have options and they know there's a lot of there's still a lot of nonsense. They know there's money in the market, but
Mm,
until they find something meaningful, they don't want to throw away that chance. And for now, they're taking cash over equity, at least in the circles that I'm seeing, or who I think people should be founders, right? So it's a very interesting dynamic where I think, there's still work to be done to get back onto that level where, it's high quality founders who are back in the belief and they find the right material problems to solve that are very meaningful and sustain in the long term. So for now, my take is that there's this gap. I don't know if you see the same thing or not.
yep. I definitely see. I think it's something similar, right? I mean, people who I think would be founders, they are. I mean, as you said, either sort of a city owner side. Some of them are even working for corporate. I mean, sort of labs, just waiting for opportunities for them to start the right thing. And also I see a lot of them actually taking their own sweet time. Not their own sweet time, but taking their own time, right? Okay, I know there's a solution. I know there's a problem. I'm working on a solution, but before I'm convinced myself that the solution might work, I don't want to take the money from outside
Yeah.
because I know that I mean, if I go, I mean, I've seen things. If I know that I've gone on the wrong path, and I would easily wait a year and a half or 2 years.
Yeah. And I think
Mm,
part of that is, and my view on early stage has changed quite a bit too, where,
mm,
traditionally in Western markets where we look at like US, it's like, oh yeah, 2 years, find product market fit, raise and scale. 4 or 5 years, you already have a big company. It,
mm,
more realistically, what I'm realizing for the majority of cases, and I bet you it's the same in the US, but you just don't hear about it because survivorship bias,
mm,
that most people wander in the desert or, they're just trying to search for a product market fit across 3, 4 years. And then it makes sense to raise. And it just takes longer time to find something more meaningful
mm,
because one, you have to do the homework to know what you're trying to
mm,
solve. And then before you, jump into the
mm,
abyss and raise the
mm,
money, then I think that's what that's the pattern we're really seeing. So, it's a lot longer tail than people probably realize. And the guys who kind of go blind into the ventures like this, either, spin in circles and then run out of money, or they have a great pedigree background, they raise money, but then, there's a lot of guys in Indonesia we see, they raised $10 million, work for 2 to 4 years and they just shut down because they didn't have the clarity. So I really think that if you have a very low burn, you're willing to work for 3 or 4 years, but it means you better really love what you're doing and you better believe what you're doing. And then
mm.
I think it kind of makes sense. So maybe that helps explain some of that mismatch, possibly. I guess I don't
I
know.
I had a long dinner with this guy who had been invested in consumption. So basically, the franchises, the chain stores, the factories, the supply chain, and everything for
Yeah,
24 years in China. And he told me an interesting observation. He said many of the founders who he invested in were not doing great. They spent between 5 to 15 years figuring out what was the right formula to do things. And many retail guys, right?
interesting.
They started. I mean, this week there's this ice cream and bubble tea brand in China called Mishui, which is actually featured in our bubble tea
Yeah,
report, which has filed for IPO. And so the founder spent, I don't know, they built a business in 1998 or 1990. I can't remember, late 1990s. And for a long time, it's like, I don't know, single digit, 4 or 5 stores, 10 stores, whatever. But once they
yeah,
figure out what's the right thing to do, and really build their process to the way that they can scale, they scaled really fast.
yeah.
They have
Hmm.
20,000 plus stores in China, 1,000 in Vietnam and Indonesia, and now I think they just opened 2 in Singapore. So they have the whole thing
Yeah,
figured out, and now they're in the growth phase. And that friend said that you see a lot of cases like that. I mean, founders spending really years to figure out what's the right formula and polish their operations. But once they're at the
correct.
point to scale, nobody can stop them.
Yeah, and a fine distinction is that they're actually doing it probably at a reasonable burn,
Mm.
or that, but they are executing. They actually are doing, right, and it's just not like a long planning phase of thinking. It's actually, execution, but it's with it, controlled risk and actually making sure they can survive all those years before they, make the big investment.
Yep, yep,
So
yep.
I don't know. So we have a few minutes to close out. So is there any way to tie this back to the book you wrote, Seeing
Oh,
the Unseen?
oh,
Everyone should go buy this book that Jianggan wrote, Seeing the Unseen Behind the Chinese Tech Giants Global Ventures. It just came out. He wrote it with Professor Guoli Chen of INSEAD. Um, anything that we can tie back to what we discussed with the book, or what is the book about?
This thing.
That thing.
That's it. Um,
That's the one.
okay, very quickly, what did we do? And we were under lockdown in the first few months of the pandemic, which said, okay, because I had been guest lecturing at Professor Chen's course called China Strategy, and this element about Chinese tech companies outside China, and we had lots of material. We spoke with lots of people. We developed, I mean, case studies and stuff. We said, okay, how about we tie everything together and form a book? So it was a much more difficult exercise than I had predicted. It took us almost 2 years to complete that, and partially because, I mean, after lockdown, everyone went back to build their own things, and professor went back to traveling around the world. I mean, doing research and doing executive programs, but 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 it's still very meaningful exercise because we look at 20 plus companies. I mean, from Alibaba, Baidu to ByteDance, and Shein, which is really hot at the moment. So we look at all these companies, we see what they have been doing outside China and what led them to do whatever they are doing, and what are the mistakes they have been making. So for us, it's a very good exercise to frame our mind, to really look deep into all these cases to see how they've been, what we can learn from them, right? So at the end of the day, we sort of divided the themes into four things, right? I mean, which a company needs to think about when they get out of their home market, be it their segment or be it their country. So leadership, people, organization, and product in that order, right? I mean, we see cases where, um, for instance, certain e-commerce company from China in Thailand, um, the CEO back in China, if he had more mental space for the business in Thailand, the business moves faster. If he gets busy with the
Mm,
domestic business, the business in Thailand moves more slowly. So that mental space, because the markets are different, right? I mean, we also have seen
yeah.
e-commerce companies doing like 120 basket size, 120 USD basket size in Saudi Arabia. They try to fit into $30 basket size in Indonesia. I mean, there are lots of things which you need to think and switch gear and allocate resources. And if things, I mean, are not going as well as you predicted for 3-4 months, do you cut? Do you change your people, or do you allocate more resources? And of course, that trickles down to people. I mean, who is in charge, right? I mean, is someone you can trust,
Yeah.
someone who can mobilize the resources in the organization, or someone knows the market, and preferably, I mean, someone who has all these elements, right? But how do you find a person who has all these elements? Now, the organization, I mean, when the leadership says, okay, home market and this foreign market, both important, but how do you turn an organization to support
Actually
that,
built
right? I
that.
mean, yeah.
Yeah.
So then at the end of the day, it's product, and because all these companies which have succeeded, they have great product capabilities. But the question
Mm.
is that, I mean, how do you have the leadership, people and organization to support this, to actually trickle down to the right product and to win the market? So yeah, a lot of case studies.
So,
We
so,
analyzed 20 plus companies.
so who would benefit most from this book? It seems that anyone looking to scale outside, I mean, specifically in the Chinese context, that would be useful, or even in those markets where they're actually building. So I don't know, who do you think would benefit the most?
I think I think we thought about that. So the people who seek to learn from Chinese tech companies in building their own tech companies, the people who are
Yeah.
thinking about joining Chinese tech companies but are a bit scared about their culture, the people who are in a market where they have to compete against these Chinese companies or work with these Chinese companies, and of course, at the end of the day, the regulators in each country who are trying to figure out, hey, these guys who in 2016 seemed like they were going to take over the world, but they're not really taking over the world. Are they learning
Yeah.
fast enough, which means that they might take over the world at some point in time, or are they just something I should not be concerned with?
Yeah. So it
Mm.
sounds like you build a really great framework to think about how companies can scale. Outside of that, though, what else is your biggest takeaway from this exercise of writing this book, the content itself, or I don't know, what else did you discover?
Um, Personally, writing a book is freaking hard. So that's the biggest personal takeaway. Uh, but second, I mean, during the pandemic, having that mental space myself to reflect, and it's been really great. I mean, looking at a few things. Now I look at the opportunities that I'm trying to assess for myself and my teams. I
Mm,
apply that framework, and that allows me
perfect.
to see some of the blind spots, some of the potential pitfalls, much more easily, I would say. And also at the end of the day, I mean, it's a tremendous sense of achievement once this is finally out.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. That's a huge congratulations to writing the book. And I think anyone in the entrepreneurship space in Southeast Asia or China or even probably anywhere would benefit from reading this because all lessons could be applied, right? So everyone should go out and get that book. All right. Any final comments before we close out, Jianggan?
Um, Still one more week to go before end of September, and we do have a lot more meetings lined up next week, so a lot of learnings, and maybe I'll write another book at some point in time.
You think so? Really? That's your
Uh,
takeaway.
uh,
It's freaking hard, but you're gonna write another book. That's good. That's good.
uh, Doing the hard things creates the moat, right?
For sure. For sure.
Yeah.
So then I guess for our next meeting, we could get hopefully Andrew and Dave on to see what their thoughts are on some of these topics. And hopefully we'll stay tuned of this
I
whirlwind of
think
meetings at your meeting.
I think
Yeah.
they would have found some mental space next week after having spent some bromance time in the mountains in where Bulgaria.
Broke back in Bulgaria.
Okay, let's see how that goes.
We'll see how
Right.
that goes. Okay, John, it
Yeah.
was great catching up with you. And then
Yeah.
we'll stay tuned. And everyone else, let us know if there's anything else you want us to talk about. So until next time.
Yeah. Adios.
Okay. Bye-bye.